the news coming out today that there's a reported extension here with Joseph Woll. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of change with the Maple Leafs and the way that they operate. I think the number, I'm sure you guys have been talking about it. I think the number pops out, right? Like I think a lot of Leaf fans are going to look at this and say, wait a minute, how is it 3.5 a year, 4 million a year for a guy that's played 39 games and is hurt all the time, like injured all the time? And I would agree with that first assessment. I had the same reaction. Like I wasn't expecting today a Joseph Woll, contract extension. I don't
No.
think anyone was bracing for that. But I remember interviewing Dubas, and I asked him this multiple times when he took over the job. And I asked him, what did you learn from Lou Lamoriello that you're going to apply to this job? And he said, patience. And he said, if you have time, use it. And there's no doubt that he would have applied that practice, and it probably worked, countless times in the past where they were going to sign a guy, and then he had a blow up year, and they decided, okay, forget it. We took our time. We realized he's not worthy of that price. So we're going to make a trade, but we decided to sit on it for a bit. Thankfully, we didn't make that trade because either we don't want to get rid of the guy now or we don't want to bring in the guy we're going to bring in. So I'm sure there's examples we don't know of where that philosophy actually worked. But there's also countless examples where the philosophy didn't work in the cap era. They didn't sign Marner ahead of time. They didn't sign Willie ahead of time. They didn't sign Hyman a year out. They didn't sign Austin a year out. There's countless examples of that. And the truth is, when it comes to the salary cap, it's a math equation, and you got to take gambles. And I think that's what the Leafs are doing here. They're taking a gamble that Joseph Woll is going to stay healthy, that they can find a way to keep him healthy, and they believe in his game. That's what they're telling us here. They believe in his game, and they believe they're going to get a discount here. And I think that will happen if he stays healthy, because I like him. I like him as a goalie. I mean, his stats would indicate that. He's not a young guy, but he seems to have his head on his shoulders. He's got a year left before this deal will kick in. But if he gives them 40 or 45 starts, and I think that's also what we're dealing with here, I think you got to be realistic. I don't think this guy's the next Hellebuck or, Vasilevsky or anything like that. But if he can be a tandem goalie, a guy that averages 40 starts a year, a 9-10 save percentage, if you're paying him 3.5, that's a discount. And if he exceeds that and turns into a true number one, it gives you 50, 55 starts and a 920 save percentage, it's a huge discount. So I think Tree Living is doing something different than maybe Dubas would have done here, which I think is a good thing. I think it's long overdue they get out in front of this. I think the number's bold. Obviously, it doesn't look great right now, but they're gambling that after this upcoming season, if he has a really good year, a platform year, that they would have had to pay him 5.5, 6, and they're going to get a discount on this. So I think you got to wait for the dust to settle. If he has a good season this year, people are going to be praising this deal. If he's injured all the time and he blows up, the Leafs are going to have to chew on it, and they're going to have to explain it.
Yeah, do you think, you talk about patience and some of these things with the draft coming up, you think they could make a splash there in some way, shape, or form? Do you see it being an eventful time for the Maple Leafs, or do you think that's more throughout the summer and in free agency?
I think they got to make up their mind this week, don't you? I mean, that they got to figure out what they're doing in terms of, like, the Marner situation's hanging over everything, as we all know. You guys talk about it daily. We talk about it daily. They got to make a decision on that. I would guess they have. In fact, they of course they have. They've made up their mind on what they want to do. It's just a matter of whether or not they can execute it. They don't have to reveal that publicly, nor are they going to reveal it publicly. But actions will speak louder than words. And this is the week. Like, you got a week today is July 1. Over the next 10 days, that's the most important 10 days of any management 10-day span over the whole season. This is it. Like, you got to get your work done because the other teams are getting their work done. You got to figure out the team you want to build, not only for this year, but 3, 5, 10 years down the road. That includes the draft and how you're going to operate. So, yeah, I think they're going to be active. I think this Woll signing speaks to what they'll probably do with goaltending, right? We're probably talking tandem. I don't know if that's Brossoit, if that's Stolarz, whoever. I don't think Allmark's coming up here, but you can make that money work. He's only making 5 this year. Woll's still only making like $800,000. So it's not as if a stud goalie is completely out of the picture here, but I think they got to figure out what they're going to do in net with Joseph Woll. Obviously, he's a part of their future. And then the Marner thing hangs over everything. And if he ends up getting dealt, then I think you're looking at a very different team. There's always going to be turnover in the back end to begin with. A lot of guys are coming and going. They're going to bring in at least a couple of pieces, in my opinion. I think they got to think up the middle of the ice in the future. Like, Tavares has 1 year left. Who knows what he's going to be at the end of the season? Can you find a way to get his replacement in a year before he expires? think that's going to be tough, but I'm sure they'll look at it. So yeah, I'm bracing for change here. I mean, Matthews will be back, Nylander will be back. I think Riley will be back. Then some of the kids, of course, and Woll. But beyond that, I think almost everything's on the table, and I think it probably should be, considering their history and what they want to do in the future.
So I've been at the majority of the games for the Cup final, and polling a lot of people in Edmonton and Florida. A lot of people think that the Marner trade is going to go down, but after July 1 because of the signing bonus. What's your gut tell you on that front? Because I think it's important to stress, Hazy, like the terminology has been a lot different from the Maple Leafs camp than it was like a year ago when it came to Willie Nylander, right?
Yeah, with Willie, they were blunt. Like Tree Living showed up and said, "We're signing Austin, we're signing Willie." Now, I think a lot of that would have been Shanahan, right? Like during the interviewing process, it's like, this is what we're doing. So if you want the job, you can be the GM, but we're signing these two guys. And not to suggest Tree Living didn't agree with that, but I think that was probably written in stone before he took the job. Yeah, I think there's a chance that I mean, the Leafs are willing to pay the signing bonus. They don't care. But the deal would be done before it happens, right? Like it's in a drawer, which is possible that it's already happened. I don't know. I don't get that impression, but at the same time, there's different reports every day. The Leafs have been pretty quiet naturally. We don't know exactly where Marner stands on all this, but the timeline of it, I don't think really matters, whether it's this week, next week, the week after. But you have to have an answer on what you're doing, I think, this week. I think you have to know that, because you have to know what kind of money you're going to have available to you in the future. And there's a chance we're going to know that the deal's done by July 1st based on who they're signing, right? If they're spending money like crazy and the money doesn't add up, you're like, wait a minute, how are you going to fit 10.9 in here? Maybe they're going to show their hand and basically suggest, hey, a deal's coming and things are going to move around. But whether it's before July 1, after July 1, I think that's irrelevant. The Leafs will clearly pay the price for whatever they have to if they believe in the move. But it's probably, you got to have the framework of a deal this week. And I think you probably have to have an answer on what you want to do if you're the Leafs, how Marner's going to react to it if you're Marner, and how the third party's going to react if they're looking to sign him to an extension, which I would assume is probably a part of the conversation as well, and possibly a mandatory part of it for both the player and whichever team he ends up going to.
For sure. What you switch a little bit to some other guys. Domi, Bertuzzi need to be done at some point. They seem like there's similarities in their play when they've signed their term, their money, that type of thing. You think they're close with any of them? I think those guys want to come back. You hearing any rumors? Who do you prefer?
I think they both would like to come back. That's my understanding. I think Max has been pretty clear on that. But yeah, Max has also played the game. Like Domi's played for a lot of teams. He's had to deal with a lot of turnover in his career. And I don't think the Leafs should go long-term with either guy. I don't think they will go long-term with either guy. I mean, both of them just signed one-year deals a year ago. Like that tells you where the marketplace was throughout the league. And I think both of them had good years this year. Were they substantially better than the year before? I wouldn't say so. Bertuzzi had a pretty good year in Detroit. He had a great first round in Boston. Max was in a different spot because he was in Chicago and they weren't that good. But he got dealt, put up pretty good numbers in the playoffs, and they both had to sit and wait. So if you're the Maple Leafs, why would you expect it to be different this year? I don't think there's going to be 5, 7, 10 teams knocking on their doors offering them long-term contracts. And if that happens, so be it. I think you got to move off that. I don't think you can commit long term to wing players. I think you know who you've got already in Austin. You're going to spend money on Willie on the wing. You've got to load up on defense. You got to have some money for someone who's going to tandem with Woll, and Woll's new deal is going to kick in after next year. You got to make sure you win those contracts. And it sucks for the players, and the players are UFAs, and they're both good guys, and they both embrace being Leafs, and I thought they really picked up their game down the stretch. And I'd be cool with having both back. But if I'm the Leafs, I'm not signing either guy to more than like a 2 or 3 year deal tops. And if there's term on it, the money's got to come down. Like you can't commit to them. If I'm picking one or the other, I probably bring Domi back. I think Domi fit pretty well with Austin. I think Domi's a guy that can move around your lineup a little bit more. There's a PR element to that as well. I think he loved being a Leaf. He speaks well. He handles the media really well. Not that Bertuzzi didn't, but I'd be cool with both coming back. But short term, I think you got to win those contracts if you're the Leafs, and I think they know that. And think the players probably know that too.
Play Armchair GM for me. Is there one potential UFA out there that you'd love to sign in Toronto?
It's probably a defenseman, right? It's the standard names that come up that I can't argue against. A guy like Brett Pesce, a guy like Chris Tanev. I'd be careful on term on both. Tanev's not a young guy. Pesce's 30, and Pesce's a good player. He's not a great player. He's a good player. They're both good players. So I would look at that. I would look at someone that can play on the right side. Ideally, if you can get both, I doubt that's going to happen. There's going to be a bunch of suitors throughout the league, but I think they need to solidify their top four. You got to have faith in who you're putting out on the ice. Top four defense, one of those two guys, a guy like, Pesce's a little bit younger. Maybe you give him a little bit more term. Maybe he basically gets the Brody deal. Brody expires. Pesce comes in, is probably a bit more money, but he's the next Brody guy that you can believe in and trust for 3 or 4 years, and then it might tail off. But I'd be okay with those two. And then again, up the middle of the ice, I think that's something they need to look at. I don't know if they're going to have money for it, but you've got Austin, you've got JT, then you got David Kampf. You can't be going into the playoffs next year with Pontus Holmberg and David Kampf as your 3-4. I don't think it can work. I'd be looking for more speed, more pace. A guy like Chandler Stevenson, I don't know what that price tag is going to look like, but I'd be intrigued by it. I think they got to add some speed up front. I think they got to add some pace, add some size, and solidify that top four on the back end. And I would guess that's what they're going to attack.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.